You are watching the proposed 2024 hunting season's presentation for the Baggs Biologist District. I am Phil Dahm, the Baggs Wildlife Biologist. The presentation order is going to be by species, starting with each in order of each respective chapter. Chapter 5, pronghorn, we're going to cover hunt areas 53 and 57. Chapter 6, deer, hunt areas 82 and 100. Chapter 7, elk, hunt areas 21 and 24. And Chapter 8, moose, hunt area 41. Chapter 5, pronghorn, is where we will start, and we will start with the Baggs pronghorn herd. That is hunt areas 53 and 55, with hunt area 53 being managed by Baggs and hunt area 55 by the Rollins District. The population objective for the Baggs herd is 9,000 pronghorn, and it is managed under recreational management strategy. The 2023 postseason population estimate from the IPM modeling was about 2,100 pronghorn, which is much below the objective range. This is primarily due to the severe winter in 2022 and 2023. We also observed extremely low fawn ratios for the herd at 40 fawns per 100 does, while that last 5-year average was 55 fawns per 100 does. Buck ratios weren't quite as low and were within the objective range for the recreational management at 48 bucks per 100 does, with the average for the last 5 years before being 57 bucks per 100 does. The population model estimate of 2,100 is corroborated by our observations in classification routes from preseason 2023, and also from observations from the mule deer sightability flight in December 2023. As a result of last year's low license quotas, we were at 25 licenses in 53 and 50 licenses in 55. We were not unable to collect very much harvest data out in the field, as hunters and harvested bucks were difficult to find. Satisfaction for the herd is typically upwards of 80 to 90% and tracks well with harvest success. However, that did drop to 75% in 2023. There was disparity across the two hunt areas, with hunt area 53 taking the bulk of that decrease, while hunters in 55 seem to experience a better hunt with more available bucks and higher success. In general, harvest survey commenters were understanding after the severe winter, but did complain about lack of available pronghorn and difficulty in finding large bucks. For the 2024 proposed hunting season, we are not proposing any changes to type 1 quotas for either 53 or 55. We are fairly low in terms of the percentage of bucks out of the population that we're planning to harvest in 2024. This low percentage is due to the skewed distribution of pronghorn across these landscapes. Hunt area 53 in particular, we classified about 2/3 of the pronghorn in the river corridor at the south end on lands inaccessible to most of the hunting public. We're also within the meat of that buck ratio objective, so no need to make any modifications there. As noticed on the previous slide, we are proposing to add a handful, 25 Type 7 licenses to a restrictive area in Hunt Area 53. This will be a shared license with Hunt Area 57 if approved. We'll cover that later on in the presentation. So this license would specifically be directed at and cover this small area in the southwest portion of Hunt Area 53. Zoomed in, you can see here Highway 789, Highway 70, kind of bracketing those animals in and along the state line of Colorado. What happened is these pronghorn, as they migrated south along the Muddy Creek and Highway 789 corridor, eventually snows got so deep that they crossed across the Little Snake River bottom here. Many fences that had snowdrifts across them and snow crusts, so they were able to walk right over top of them, including the highway fences on Highway 70. They ended up south of Highway 70 here in this pocket, and were unable later that spring to migrate back north due to the melted out snow and a lack of ability to get across the highway and fences. As a result, these pronghorn have set up shop here for a number of years. This is a license type we've had in the past to address this issue. We've got too high a density of pronghorn up there, and they are affecting the habitats. This is a crucial winter range also for mule deer, and they are affecting those habitats negatively as a result. Since they're unable to contribute back to the herd really in any way due to barriers, we've got to manage those densities down there such that we reduce that impact to the winter range. This map is specifically classification data from the pre-hunting season ground classification effort. You can see the density of observations. Each one of these is a group of pronghorn. There were 80 pronghorn classified down there. That was about 30% of the total classification number for Hunt Area 53, and 75% of those 80 were does and fawns. So a significant huntable cohort there. Resuming Chapter 5, pronghorn. Our second pronghorn herd for the Baggs District is the Bitter Creek herd. That is Hunt Areas 57 and 58, just to the west of 53 and 55, across Highway 789. Hunt Area 57 is managed by the Baggs District, and Hunt Area 58 is managed by the Rock Springs. The Bitter Creek pronghorn herd does have a population objective of 12,000 pronghorn. It is a special management herd, and as a result has a higher buck ratio objective at least 60 compared to recreational herds. The postseason population estimate from the IPM model was 5,140, which, as you can see, is well below objective and even well below the objective range. This is not surprising given the extreme winter of 2022-2023, 2 winters ago. Fawn ratios were also very low, along with Baggs. However, fawn ratios in the Bitter Creek herd are typically low. They were slightly lower than average at 33 fawns per 100 does, with the last 5-year average being 37. These low fawn ratios are mostly due to drought, and with recent high fawn ratios being around 50. We would expect those fawn ratios to tick up this next year, with pronghorn not having been affected by a harsh winter, but we shall see. Buck ratios were 65 bucks per 100 does, which is above the minimum of 60 for a special management herd. That average 5-year is a bit lower at 59 bucks per 100 does, indicating perhaps slightly less mortality maybe on bucks than does in the winter of 22-23. Hunter satisfaction normally runs around 80 to 90%, right along with the harvest success. That did drop to 73% in 2023. This was due to fewer pronghorn available on the landscape in general, and hunters discussing in the comments that they had a lot of difficulty finding good mature bucks, in particular knowing what this herd has been capable of in the past. As was in the Bags herd, we were not able to collect much in the way of harvest data out in the field, just due to the lack of hunters present and lack of bucks to investigate. For the 2024 proposed hunting seasons, we are not proposing any changes in the Type 1 quotas. We are only harvesting at this rate an estimated 10% of the bucks available, and that is across both hunt areas 57 and 58. We are within the objective range also for the herd, so this level of harvest at this point is sustainable. As was the case in hunt area 53, we are proposing that Type 7 license to go across those hunt areas, but with a limitation down in this southeast corner of hunt area 57 on the 57 side. These pronghorn did not migrate down as a result of winter conditions a few years ago. They are a group that stays in this area due to the irrigation and plentiful feed, particularly in the summertime, but also in the sagebrush benches up on top closer to the Colorado line. 40 pronghorn were classified in this area alone last fall, and again 75% of those were does and fawns. These pronghorn are more of a nuisance to landowners, and we do propose this harvest to help reduce the propensity for damage in that area. Moving on to Chapter 6, which is mule deer. We do only have one herd of deer for the Bags district. That is the Bags mule deer herd. This spans hunt areas 82, 84, and 100. It is also part of non-resident Region W, with 82 and 100 currently having general license hunts and falling under those regulations. Hunt areas 82 and 100 are managed by the Bags district, and most of hunt area 84 is managed by the Rollins district. You can see that in the south central corner portion of the state here. The Bags deer herd hunt in 2023 was a pretty limited opportunity, with only 5 days available for the general season, with one weekend day starting on Sunday. As a result, we had the lowest harvest recorded for Bags and the lowest participation. Participation was 1,358 hunters. They harvested 321 bucks. that is shown here. You can see that's the lowest in recent history, but the next closest amount of harvest and effort was in 1985 with 1,900 hunters killing about 550 bucks. Along with that drop in harvest, we did see also a drop in satisfaction down to 23%. This tracks very well with success, with normal success and satisfaction being in the 40 to 60% range, depending on the season and the structure of that season and the limitations. But yeah, it was less than half of a lot of that range in 2023. Harvest survey comments followed that poor harvest, with hunters discussing difficulty in finding bucks in general, mature bucks, not seeing the numbers of bucks they typically would. However, they were perhaps more understanding with the knowledge of the winter we did just experience in 2022 and 2023. For the Bags herd, the population objective is 19,000 deer. It is under special management strategy, and the 2023 post-hunting season population estimate from the model was 11,833 deer, which is below, as you can see, the objective range. Now in 2022, by the time the end of 2022 had occurred, we likely had fewer deer than this 11,833. The fawn ratios were quite low in 2023 when we flew in December, at 41 fawns per 100 does. This is the lowest in the history of the herd. You can see the average, we typically run about 63 fawns per 100 does and upwards of the mid-70s on the good years. Our buck ratio was also quite low at 18 bucks per 100 does, and you can see the average again there at 27 bucks per 100 does. With the caveat being the component of the adult buck ratio was similar to the last 2 years at 15, and the yearling buck portion of this 18 was seemingly what took the biggest hit, and it was 3. Typically in the Bags herd, we can be upwards of 15. We did perform a siteability survey in December of 2023. It is the first siteability survey for the Bags mule deer herd. That siteability survey is used to estimate the number of deer we have across the herd, and this helps ground the population model so that it has a better starting place when it's using other metrics to estimate the population in future years. There are 2 major considerations with this type of survey. First off is resource constraints, i.e. money. We don't have enough to fly the entire herd completely, so we have to sample a portion of it. And then we take what we know about the portion that we sampled and apply it to the areas we did not sample. That helps us get the estimate. Second, we also have to account for the number of deer we miss in the areas we do sample. And so we collect a variety of environmental factors where the deer groups are standing, even the size of the deer groups, their activity status, and this helps us figure out how many deer we actually miss within the areas we do sample. Here is how the survey turned out in terms of the sample. The dark blues are areas of higher deer densities, and the light blues are areas of lower deer densities. The samples that were selected randomly were the squares with the red dots in them. We did sample about 80% of the high subunits, and we sampled about 10% of the low subunits. This is a very intensive survey. It is about 40 hours of flight time for the bags herd. And we covered about 427 square miles of the 2,580 that the herd encompasses. Now for some results. We did observe 1,089 groups of deer. Those number anywhere from 1 deer to 40 deer. That totaled about 6,380 deer observed across all sampling units that were sampled. We observed 6,097 deer in the high units specifically. So if we do some math here, we surveyed 80% of the high units. So we take 6,097 divided by 8, 80% or 0.8, and that accounts for the sample size of 80%. Then we calculate in the deer that we missed within the sample and the deer we would have missed had we sampled the other 20%. That was 1,412 deer. So the estimate for mule deer in the high subunits was 9,033 with a confidence interval of around 8 to 10,000, which is pretty good for a field survey. In the lows, we observed 283 deer, obviously a lot lower. With that simple correction, remember we only surveyed 10% of those lows, so that's going to correct a lot more than the high correction at 80%. So that correction, 283 divided by 0.1 or 10% is 2,830. And then within all of those blocks, we missed 509 deer total. So the estimate for the low deer density areas was 3,339. Now, you can see the wide confidence interval here, 1,300 to 5,300. That is just due to the variety of deer observations across the area. In some of these areas, like this one in particular, we observed a large group of deer, those types of things, and that variability and lots of zero blocks are going to lead to that wide confidence interval. So with those two estimates in mind, we just simply add those together for an estimate of 12,327 from the siteability flight. Now, if you recall the population estimate, it was in the realm of 11,000, so we're right there in the ballpark of the population estimate as well. Bag's mule deer herd was a focal herd for sampling in 2023, so we made great efforts to collect as many lymph nodes as we could for CWD sampling and testing. Out of the harvested adult bucks we collected good samples from, we observed a prevalence of 16%. This map shows the distribution of those positive occurrences. This would be ones coming from the Bag's herd in most of the fairly typical deer areas that you might expect. Lower sample size than normal, so I would expect chronic wasting disease to be more across the whole herd than just in these areas. These outside areas are other herds, so we won't look at them. But we will be sampling again due to our low sample size in 2023. We will be sampling again in 2024. Now here's a look at the trend of chronic wasting disease prevalence in the Bag's herd. The estimates for each year, this blue line, are cumulative across that year and the previous 2 years. And this is to kind of correct for the small sample sizes we have in some of these intermediate years. Now you can see back here, 2024 was our first big year of monitoring. The first several years of chronic wasting disease monitoring, uh, we did not detect CWD positive deer. We did start to pick one up here in 2007 though, and you can see we kind of just trickle around that 1% type range, and then we start climbing over the last course of the last 10 years. This climb and current prevalence is somewhat alarming, as in other herds across the state that have seen high CWD prevalences, they have seen effects on population performance, including fewer mature bucks in the harvest, difficulty in finding more mature bucks, um, and also affecting population performance in terms of fawn productivity. I did want to draw your attention, if you're interested, there was a in-depth CWD conversation and presentation a couple commission meetings ago in January. Take a gander at that. It starts about 4 minutes and 30 seconds in. There's the link to it on YouTube. You can also scan this QR code with your phone and key up that video. I did want to mention, in regards to mountain lion, black bear, and coyote management, just some things that have been going on in the Baggs area. We have increased mountain lion harvest limits back starting in 2022 by about 43%. It had been stagnant for a couple decades prior to that. We've also increased black bear harvest limits starting in 2023 by 26%, and that was after an increase of 36% starting in 2020. And this last year, we harvested more black bears down here in the Sierra Madres than we ever have in the past. We also have been partnering with Wildlife Services in our AD&B with some coyote work. The last 3 years, down in the Red Polygon area. That's the southern end of the unit. Battle Mountain, Savory Creek, Loco Creek, all of that country. Recently, the Game and Fish Commission approved some extra funds, and we're able to spend those in bags as a result of the harsh winters. And we're looking at going up in this odd-shaped green polygon up to the north that kind of encompasses the Sand Hills, Doty Mountain, Wild Cow, Deep Gulch, those kind of countries, and all up around Miller Hill as well. Pending personnel and availability, we'll see if we get that high up or not. Prior to jumping into the seasons for mule deer, I did want to review a little bit about antler point restrictions, since that is how we primarily, one of the ways we manage opportunity for hunting mule deer bucks in the Baggs herd. So first, we're going to just take a look at some of the things that APRs kind of are good for, and maybe some of the things that APRs aren't so good for in general. So what they're kind of good for is they will increase buck ratios temporarily, typically about 2 years, maybe upwards of 3 years. We might see an increase in the buck ratio. This is through exclusion of a segment of the buck population from harvest. So really what we're doing is shifting pressure off of younger cohorts of deer, i.e. in our case typically yearling bucks, and shifting them onto older age classes, so 2.5-year-old and older type of bucks. We typically see with an antler point restriction that we have fewer hunters participate. That tends to vary based on the degree of the antler restriction. So we've done some 4-point restrictions and also some 3-point restrictions. We'd have fewer hunters in the 4-point restriction and a few more in the 3-point restriction. We also see decreased harvest typically when we apply those antler point restrictions to the fall hunt. We also see with APRs an increase in the proportion of adult males that have 3 points or less. This is just due to, again, that shift of pressure that we talked about from the younger age classes to the older age classes. Once these younger, perhaps inferior bucks get to be older, don't grow beyond 2 or 3 points on a side, and thus are not vulnerable to harvest when an APR is applied. So where do APRs come up short? APRs will not increase buck ratios in the long term. In the past, buck ratios typically return to pre-antler point restriction levels fairly quickly, and that is regardless of the continue of APR or not. And again, we're shifting harvest pressure. If we shift that harvest pressure long term to the older age classes of bucks, we're putting more younger bucks on the landscape, but we're not maintaining those older age classes as well when we have APRs on, because we are putting more pressure on them. We also don't do so good with APRs at increasing proportions of mature bucks, as I just alluded to, long term. And again, that's due to putting more harvest pressure on those deer when we have antler point restrictions on. In addition to that, in herds like the Baggs herd, where we have good genetics and we can produce greater deer with more points at younger ages, we're going to harvest those bucks more quickly when we have an antler point restriction, as that 2.5-year-old 4x4 hasn't wisened up to the hunting seasons yet, and he's going to be very vulnerable, even though he is the type of buck that we would want to recruit into those older age classes. What APRs also aren't effective at doing is improving productivity. So fawn ratios, fawn productivity, we can get into the single digits in buck ratios and still have 90+% of our does being bred and having fawns. So we're not going to improve fawn productivity by having higher buck ratios. And by default, what follows is we're not going to increase the population size if we don't have greater fawn productivity with buck ratios higher. So let's look at some data for the Baggs mule deer herd specifically. Let's look at hunter success and participation. We do see an increase in the number of deer harvested in years when we do not have an antler restriction. So over the course of the last 3 cycles, or about 12, 14 years, we've seen about 77% more deer harvested in the non-APR years. So that average 841 in years with an APR and 1,489 bucks harvested in years when we don't have an APR. And those APRs range from a 3-point on a side to a 4-point on a side. We also see 35% more hunters in non-APR years. So we are seeing that shift away from participation in those years. And we also see about the same number increase in success in non-APR years. So yes, we are, as we saw it set up here, killing more bucks in those non-APR years. This is a little tricky in bags because we do manage opportunity with season links as well. And so these increases are somewhat difficult to parse out from years like last year when we had 5-day seasons, and other years when we might have had a 12-day season, but also with an APR. And just so you can see some data on a visual in the graph here, the orange is numbers of hunters. The blue is harvest success. For the most part, they track pretty evenly. Certain years, maybe we have a little bit more harvest. Other years, maybe we've got a little bit less harvest. And those kind of things diverge a little bit. So let's take a look at buck ratios. We do see in classifications, we do see 4% higher total buck ratio. That includes adult bucks and yearling bucks in the years where we have an antler restriction. And this is a direct result of increases in yearling buck mule deer whenever we fly in December, as these are deer that would have been passed over in an antler restriction during the hunting season. And that's illustrated in this graph over here, with the orange being the yearling buck ratio, and this gray being the fawn ratio from the year prior. So if we look at an example here, and this is just illustrating that we increase these buck ratios in years following good fawn productivity, in addition to having antler restriction. So if we pick out a year, let's say 2013, we've got 17 yearling bucks per 100 does, and the year prior we had 78 fawns per 100 does. So that logic stands. We also, these green dots indicate years when we had antler point restrictions, and so a lot of those follow very well as well. Years of large divergence, decent year here in 2016. That was right prior to the winter of 2016-17, quite a bit of mortality. Yearling buck ratio was 7 in that year. So you do see some divergence there, but it's typically due to more severe winters. And you can see that to the extreme here with our yearling buck ratio in December of 2023 was 3 bucks per 100 does. That is the third lowest in herd history, I believe. That was after having 65 fawns per 100 does, which is above average fawn productivity. And that's directly due to winter severity. In terms of buck ratios and how APRs may have affected them, we were not able to increase buck ratios, and we kind of just discussed this. We're not able to increase buck ratios in years following the poorer fawn productivity. So while, for example, here in 2017, we had that divergence from the severe winter, above average winter perhaps. We weren't able to take that 7 yearling bucks, that lower fawn productivity, and turn it into 14 is all we're saying there. Okay, so let's look at the effects of APRs as we have data for it in regards to classification in mature bucks. We do see, and this is a table down here of all of these data. You can pause the video, take a screen cap, and just look at those more closely as you like. We do see 4% higher adult buck ratio in the non-APR years. And so if we think about what that means, we've got more adult bucks in the years when we don't have an APR. And that's just simply as a result of that harvest pressure again. More hunters are harvesting younger bucks in those years, and thus the older, more mature bucks end up passing through the season, escaping the season, and carrying into that December classification flight. We do see 5% higher total buck ratio in APR years. Now, so why is that? If we have higher adult buck ratio in non-APR years, why would we have a higher total buck ratio in APR years? And that again is a direct result of recruiting those yearling bucks into that adult age class leading into winter in December. So if we can look at some examples down here, 2012 we had a 3-point antler restriction, 12 yearling bucks per 100 does. 2013, 17 yearling bucks per 100 does. In general, we're going to pass through a lot more yearling bucks in those years. Now, with 2023 being the exception due to the winter loss of 22 and 23. Another interesting nugget to pull out, I like to look at these class 3 ratios for a lot of reasons. These are our biggest, most mature bucks, north of 25-inch spread type deer. We do see 16% higher class 3 ratios in years when we have an antler point restriction. Now, again, we do see that, but we see that in a 3 to 5 year lag after the previous antler point restriction year. And this seems to be because the recruitment from those years, i.e. this yearling buck ratio that we've recruited and saved by having an antler restriction, has now reached maturity by the time we kind of hit the next APR cycle. So if you kind of take a look at those non-APR cycle, low yearling buck ratios, low numbers of class 3s or proportions of class 3s, and then once we get into those APR years, this 8, 12, 11% of class 3s in the classification data, these are 4 to 7 year old bucks. They came from back here in this zone right here. Okay, continuing looking at data with mature bucks, let's look at the mature bucks we see in the harvest data. When we look at average age of harvest and how our antler point restrictions has affected that, I'm considering here just deer that we would send teeth off for, so 2.5 years old and older, is 8% higher during the 4-point restriction time periods. It's the same otherwise. So in years with 3-point restrictions and years with no antler point restrictions, we have the same average age of harvest. So we've only seen that shift in pressure to the oldest age classes seemingly during the 4-point antler restriction years. We did have our lowest average age of harvest in 2023 compared to the last 5 years. That was after 3 years of the antler point restriction, in part perhaps due to the antler point restriction, but likely more so due to the severe winter of 2022-2023. You can kind of see the trend of the age of bucks harvested here in blue. And we can also take a look at the average number of points, tracks along that same general line. Some other stats with the harvest that we can take a gander at. Average spread increases in APR years 6%. Average number of points increases 10% over non-APR years. And the proportion of class 3s in the harvest, we kind of talked about that already, increases upwards of 72% in APR years. So again, we're shifting our hunting pressure off of the younger age class bucks and placing it on the older age class bucks. Another factor, and just to illustrate that point further, the proportion of yearling bucks in the harvest doubles in non-APR years. So again, shifting that pressure off of the older age classes and putting it on the younger age classes. You can kind of see up here how the orange, average number of points, the blue, average age of harvested deer, those things track fairly well. We do have some disparity there, but perhaps due to low sample sizes. So I would say, in summary of this information, what we need to get more mature bucks is good fawn ratios in the year previous to an APR in a current year. We add those things together and we will end up, again, recall the lag time, we will end up with more mature bucks about 3 years down the road starting. Since we see that it's perhaps not the best long term to have antler point restrictions every year, when should we apply antler point restrictions if our goal is more larger antlered bucks? So I want to run through a concept here that has been studied and proven most recently with pronghorn right across the road in the Bitter Creek herd, where they showed one of the primary drivers for horn size in a given pronghorn buck was the condition or environmental factors and variables that his mother observed while he was still unborn. And so and this has also been looked at and shown in deer. And so if we kind of just run through an example within the context of the Baggs herd, to illustrate that, say we have the same doe, gets bred by the same buck, just for the sake of argument, one in November of 2022 and one in November of 2021. In our example here, now these two deer in 2022 and 2021 December, we've got fawns now in utero. They are currently experiencing very similar winter conditions. We have a very, very high potential or high probability that fawn is going to reach their antler size potential and perhaps body growth potential. It's maximized or close to it in both years at this point. Continuing our example here, we've moved into a March timeframe. Let's think back to March of 2023, recall the conditions, recall the snow depths, the lack of forage availability on winter ranges. Now we are seeing a divergence in both the condition of the doe, whereas that doe in March of 2022 was experiencing fairly light snow loading, lots of available forage, and perhaps was even in a higher, better precip zone with better quality forage as well. And so what we see also then is a divergence in the long-term or lifetime potential of the fawn that's still in utero, that is still yet to be born that coming May, or March 2022 deer. That fawn is going to be able to maximize its potential better than that fawn that is to be born in May of 2023. So this concept and thought process begs the questions: should we have had an antler point restriction in 2023? Perhaps not. Should we have an antler point restriction in 2024 is the better question, and the question we need to address during this season setting process. So recall that we had the lowest fawn ratio ever documented in bags in 2023. Frequently, after a difficult winter, we see very, very good fawn productivity, but we perhaps haven't seen a winter this severe, and as a result, we saw a fairly low fawn productivity for 2023. Anecdotally, managers around the herd have been observing, as have hunters and sportsmen, smaller fawns kind of across the board this year on winter ranges. We do this year have pretty prime winter range conditions. This is due to several factors: the phenomenal growing season in 2023. It has been a very light year in terms of snow packs, and a very light year in terms of average temperatures have been on the higher end. And overall, these winter ranges have a lot lower deer densities than they ought to be able to support. So forage condition is good, and forage availability is excellent. As a result, unfortunately, of the low fawn ratios, many does are without fawns. Even the does with fawns are in excellent body condition in terms of body fat stores surviving the winter. And as a result, our fawn crop in 2024 should be excellent in all metrics in terms of fawn body condition, the metrics we just discussed in terms of lifetime potential, and also in terms of numbers, that fawn ratio. We would expect it to be fairly high this coming December. So circling back to our concepts of antler point restrictions with the poor yearling buck cohort coming into 2024, it would be bucks that would be hunted in the fall of 24. We're proposing an opportunity to relieve some of that hunting pressure on our mature buck cohorts by removing the antler point restriction for 1 year, and with the intent of reapplying it in 2025 to protect that next higher quality fawn cohort that is being born here this coming May of 2024. Again, with the idea that we're going to reduce the amount of harvest on our more mature buck classes that perhaps were not born in these severe winters, and put that on the younger age classes that maybe aren't potentially as high of a quality. This is a long-term proposition, as we discussed. There is this lag effect in the antler point restriction. It will take probably until the next antler point restriction to see the effects of this one coming up this year, if approved. And of course, hunting regulations in 2025 will obviously be run through the typical public process then as well to get input and such. We are also proposing to add a day to the hunt. That puts us at a Monday through Sunday. That will align us with the rest of the general seasons to the north and west in Region W in particular, and allow for those 2 weekend days at the end of the season in 2024. And also, we are not proposing at this time to make changes to the Region W non-resident quota. It is 600 licenses. This this quota led to last year the lowest participation from non-residents we've ever had in the herd at 450. Moving along to Chapter 7, which is elk. Our first herd is going to be the petition elk herd. That is on Area 124 in south central Wyoming. This hunt area is managed across both the Baggs and the Rock Springs biologist districts. So for the petition elk herd, this elk herd is managed recreationally. The objectives are a satisfaction objective, both for landowners and for sportsmen, hunters. You can see that objective line is 60% satisfied is our objective for each of those. The hunter satisfaction is on in the left bars in the given years, and the landowner satisfaction is on the right bars. You can see this year we had a fairly typical hunter satisfaction at 71% satisfied. Middle of the road, we've seen some lower satisfaction numbers in recent history, and we've also seen some higher ones. Counter to that, we did see a pretty significant drop off in landowner satisfaction at 20% satisfied. This is a bit awkward because 20% felt that elk numbers were at desired levels, therefore satisfied. However, 60% felt that elk numbers were above desired levels, and 20% felt they were below desired levels. So a couple different directions there for the dissatisfied portion of that metric. Why the decrease, the sudden drop off in 2023? Most of that resulted from elk numbers increasing over the last several years in the Little Snake River bottom in the southeast corner of 124, and landowners having issues with elk in growing hay and alfalfa fields and also in hay stacks. We also take a look at the average age of harvested bulls. We ask that hunters mail in their teeth after they harvest a bull. That is the front two incisors, the middle incisors of bull elk. And that average, 3-year average, is the metric we look at for that. It was 6.5 years old this year, so still very good opportunity out there to find a good quality elk to harvest. Just in general, across the board, between the Type 1 any elk licenses and the Type 4 cow or calf licenses, we saw very similar success and harvest on those both license types this year, and we've seen that every year since 2021 when we established those current quotas. We do have very limited population data for the herd due to very low densities across most of the herd and the lack of budget to take a look at so much country for seemingly so few elk. So as a result of these discussions, we did propose to maintain the Type 1 and the 4 quotas. You can see those are 70 for the 1s and 100 for the 4s. We do shift those 4s up to the north end later in the season to try to get some additional harvest up in the checkerboard. The proposed change for the year is a proposal to add some Type 6s in a restricted area that is specifically down in and around the Little Snake River and that is to reduce those elk numbers and the presence in and around the irrigated lands and to avoid damage into the future. So fairly modest proposal of 25 licenses, but we wanted to make sure there was going to be available opportunity before putting too many hunters in a small area. Continuing with Chapter 7 elk proposals, our other elk herd we're going to discuss is the Sierra Madre elk herd. That is hunt areas 13, 15, 21, 108, and 130 down here in south central Wyoming. We do share this herd with 3 biologist districts, the Baggs district, mostly hunt area 21, the Rollins folks, hunt areas 108 and 130, and then the Saratoga folks with hunt areas 13 and 15. This is also part of non-resident Region S down here in the southern part of the state. The Sierra Madre herd is managed under a trend count objective of 5,000 elk. It is a recreationally managed herd. The 2023 trend count assessed in midwinter is 4,627 elk, with the 3-year average being the way we assess that objective was 5,528 elk. So we are within that 20% allowable objective range, slightly above the objective number of 5,000. And this is the first time we've been able to assess the objective since the change in 2019, hence the single bar on the trend count bar graph down here. Relevant to the bag side of things, we did see a decrease in elk from 2021 when we did our first trend count. We counted 3,777 elk in hunt area 21 alone, and we only counted 2,702 elk in 2023 in hunt area 21 alone. Gaff ratio across the herd was a little below average at 33. We collect those data the same time as we do the trend count. Bull ratio was also below what we see on average. The average last several years has been about 33. We did only see 25 bulls per 100 cows this year. Likely in large part due to a fairly low spike bull ratio in hunt area 21. And I do think this is a result of the winter of 22-23. Those spike bulls would have been calves in that year. And I do believe there was a fair amount of calf mortality at the southern parts of hunt area 21 and down into Colorado during that winter. As far as the hunt went across the herd, we had almost 4,200 hunters. They harvested almost 2,000 elk. This is about 15% fewer than the last couple years, but more cows harvested last year than since about 2015, and also the lowest proportion of bulls harvested in about 5 years. This is likely in part due to the lower spike bull numbers in southern hunt area 21, but also believe likely due to between the winter and hunting seasons have been fairly liberal, starting to kind of get a handle on elk numbers in hunt area 21 a little bit. We did see herd-wide satisfaction drop to 59%. Like deer, that typically tracks fairly well with harvest success. And that satisfaction is from 2023. And that drop was due to the hunts in the general areas. available public land in 130 is almost non-existent, but 108 has a fairly significant amount of elk harvest, and hunters were quite successful and quite happy in Hunt Area 108. The lower success across the general units was due to a variety of factors, perhaps lower elk numbers from uh, liberal elk seasons and also severe winter 2 years ago, um, but also a very hot and dry elk season across the board all the way into November. Harvest survey comments reflected this: the drop in satisfaction and the struggle to kill elk in the public lands in the general hunt areas. Hunters definitely expressed concern about seeing a lot fewer elk and having trouble finding elk in those areas. We did also sample for brucellosis. If you want more information on that, you can find that on our website. We sampled heavily in Hunt Area 21 and 108, a couple from 15 as well. We ended up with 78 quality samples with no positives detected. So in terms of proposals for the hunt, we're going to focus again on Hunt Area 21. You can view my neighboring biologist proposals presentations to see their seasons and justifications. For 2024, we are proposing in Hunt Area 21 to remove that typical bull only, antlered elk only opener. That has been the first 3 days of the season, the last 2 years. We use that to help disperse pressure, hunting pressure across the general units into 13, 15 for that opener. With the season starting on a weekday this year, we did not feel that was necessary. We also, as a result of probably we're going to harvest a few more cows on this opener, maybe quite a few more cows to help balance that out. We are proposing to remove the antlerless portion of the general hunt. That was the first couple weeks in November last year. We are also proposing a decrease of 100 Type 6 licenses, cow-calf licenses for Hunt Area 21 as well. That is, again, to help offset that any elk opener that is proposed, but also offset that the indications that we're getting on top of these elk, and we may be able to ease off harvest a little bit. We also are proposing a slight change to the youth hunt. Notice it is October 12th and 13th proposed. That does leave a gap between the youth season and the rest of the general opener, and this is twofold. It puts the youth hunt on a weekend, but it also allows a day prior to the general opener for elk to calm down, redistribute across the unit, and be more available for harvest come the opener for the rest of folks. As I mentioned, Hunt Area 21 and the Madres are part of the Region S elk region for non-residents. For non-resident folks, if you're putting in for Region S, this is the map you've probably seen already. The white hunt areas are areas that are going to have a general season. That's where your Region S license can be utilized. Hunt Area 21 being one of those. That quota for 2024 is proposed to be 1,050 licenses. That's 1,050 hunters spread across Region S, and that quota resulted from the last 3-year average of non-resident participation for these hunt areas with general elk hunts in them. Finally, we're going to tick on Chapter 8, moose hunting seasons. We've got one hunt area, well, half of one hunt area. That is Hunt Area 41 right down here in the Madres. Spans most of the moose in this hunt area are going to be in the Baggs district and the Saratoga district, with some of the hunt area following up north, south of Rollins there. So we'll specifically be looking at Hunt Area 41. You can check out the Saratoga presentation if you're interested in the other hunt areas. So this is the proposal for the whole herd, but again, focusing on Hunt Area 41. In the Madres, we've been observing increases in this moose population, good calf productivity on a regular basis, and very good bull ratios in Hunt Area 41. As a result of that, for 2024, we are proposing to split out 41 and 45, as you'll note on the sheet. Split those out from Hunt Area 38, the Snowy Range, and allocate their own quota of Type 1 licenses to that area. So we are proposing 5 of those Type 1s in 41 alone, and those Type 1s will only be good for 41 alone. They are proposing a slight increase to the Type 4 cow or calf licenses, antlerless moose licenses at 5, and those continue to still be good for all 3 hunt areas. So make sure to note that distinction. With that, if you would like to provide comments, all comments are shared with the Commission. You need to submit comments by the deadline, that is March 29th at 5 p.m. Here is the website for doing so. You can also submit comments in written fashion and mail those to this address. Next steps as far as season setting, after we collect public's feedback and have public meetings, we will review those comments and feedback on our proposals, and then we'll present a final proposal to the Game and Fish Commission at their next meeting, which is April 16th and 17th in Riverton, and the public is welcome to attend and comment during that meeting as well. I am Phil Dahm, the Baggs wildlife biologist. If you have any additional questions or concerns about data or want to take a harder look at anything, please feel free to reach out to me. I am available via email up here. I am also available via my cell here. And these are the hunt areas that are in question for my district as a biologist. Thank you.